My name is Alara Vance, and I am an interpreter for the Galactic Accord. It's a job that sounds far more glamorous than it is. Most days, I'm not bridging the gap between civilizations. I'm translating trade agreements, mineral rights disputes, and the endless, tedious bureaucracy of 100 different species, all trying not to accidentally start a war over a misunderstood pronoun. The key to my success is a rigid, almost pathological neutrality. I am a conduit, not a participant. I filter out emotion, opinion, and personality until I am nothing but a clear channel for meaning. That was my mantra as I was escorted onto the command deck of the Drazhari Dreadnought. The ship, a monstrous thing of jagged black metal and pulsing red energy lines, hung in orbit around a disputed mineral-rich moon like a predator sizing up its prey. My job? Facilitate negotiations between the human colony on the moon and Commander Ssathis of the Drazhari Collective, who had just declared the moon to be under their ancient territorial claim. The Drazhari were newcomers to the galactic stage, but they'd made an impression. Tall, avian creatures with sharp, predatory features and plumage that shifted color with their moods, they were renowned for their military prowess and their utter disdain for what they saw as weaker species. They communicated in a series of clicks, trills, and resonant hums that were nearly impossible for the human voice to replicate. That's where I came in. My neural implant translated meaning, and I related in clear, neutral standard. The command deck was a cathedral of intimidation. Harsh, angled lighting. A constant, subsonic hum that vibrated in my teeth. Rows of Drazhari warriors, their feathers sleeked back in what I'd learned was an aggressive posture, watched me with unblinking golden eyes. And at the center of it all, on a raised dais, stood Commander Ssathis. She was magnificent in a terrifying way, taller than the others. Her feathers were a deep, iridescent crimson, shot through with streaks of gold. A long, sweeping crest swept back from her brow, and her eyes were the color of molten gold. She wore a fitted suit of some flexible black armor, and at her hip was a weapon that looked like it could vaporize a small city. She stared at me as I was brought before her, her gaze a physical weight. "So," she clicked, her voice translated by my implant into a cold, precise female voice in my ear. The humans send a female, a translator, not a soldier, not a diplomat, a mouthpiece. Her beak-like mouth curved into what I could only interpret as a sneer. It seems they have already conceded their inferiority. I kept my face perfectly blank. "I am here to facilitate communication, Commander. The colony's governor is prepared to discuss your claim." She stepped down from the dais, circling me slowly. Her claws clicked against the metal floor. The air around her smelled of ozone and something spice-like. "Discuss? There is nothing to discuss. This world was mapped by my ancestors before your species had learned to walk upright. Your presence is a trespass. Your colony is an infestation. You will leave, or you will be removed." She stopped directly in front of me, towering over my 5'4" frame. "Those are the only terms. Now, translate that to your soft, frightened leaders." Her warriors behind her rustled their feathers in what I recognized as approval. This was a show of strength, a performance of dominance. They expected me to tremble, to stammer, to beg for leniency. They expected me to be small. I opened my mouth to deliver her message in the neutral, professional tone I was paid for. But my brain, that traitorous organ, decided to take a detour. It replayed the phrase, "your soft, frightened leaders." And for some reason, an image popped into my head. Governor Heston, a portly man with a perpetually worried expression, hiding under his desk during the last simulated invasion drill. The juxtaposition of Ssathis' terrifying grandeur and the image of the governor's tweed-clad backside disappearing under a desk was so absurd, so perfectly, cosmically ridiculous, that I couldn't stop it. I laughed. It wasn't a nervous giggle or a polite chuckle. It was a full, genuine laugh that bubbled up from my chest and escaped before I could clamp my jaw shut. A short, sharp burst of sound that hung in the air of that dreadnought like a bomb. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the subsonic hum seemed to falter. The Drazhari warriors froze, their golden eyes wide with what I could only describe as shock. One of them let out a low, involuntary squawk of disbelief. Commander Vexus's head snapped back as if I'd struck her. Her crimson feathers ruffled outwards in a chaotic burst, the colors swirling with confusion. For a long, agonizing moment, she just stared at me, her molten gold eyes searching my face for any sign of fear, of insanity, of something that would explain this inexplicable breach of protocol. Then, a low, rumbling sound emanated from her chest. It was unlike any Drazhari vocalization in my database. It was a series of short, staccato bursts. It took my implant a full 3 seconds to process it and deliver the translation directly into my auditory cortex. It was laughter. Commander Vexus was laughing. She threw her head back, her crest fanning out in a magnificent display of iridescent color, and let out a series of loud, barking clicks and trills that was unmistakably, universally, the sound of pure amusement. Her warriors stared, their beaks hanging open. One of them nervously clicked, "Commander, are you unwell?" She ignored them, her golden eyes fixed on me. The laughter subsided, but the amusement remained, glittering in her gaze. "You laughed?" she clicked, her voice no longer cold, but filled with a kind of wonder. "In the face of my entire battle fleet, surrounded by my finest warriors, you laughed." I swallowed, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was involuntary. A malfunction. "No," she said, stepping closer again, but this time her posture was different. Less aggressive, more curious. It was genuine. It was real. Do you know how rare that is? In my world, every sound, every posture, every flick of a feather is a calculated message. We do not make involuntary sounds. We do not laugh. It is a concept we struggle with. The spontaneous expression of joy in the face of the absurd. She tilted her head, studying me like a new and fascinating species. What could possibly be absurd about this moment? The honest answer was the image of my boss hiding under a desk. But I had a feeling that wouldn't translate well. So I went with the broader truth. Because it's all so much. The ship, the warriors, the threats. It's theater. A very impressive, very deadly theater, but theater nonetheless. And I've been in this job long enough to know that when someone is trying this hard to intimidate you, it's usually because they're not as certain of their position as they'd like you to believe. The warriors behind her rustled indignantly. One of them stepped forward. "Commander, this soft-skin dares to mock the collective. She should be executed for." Vexus raised a single, clawed hand. The warrior fell silent instantly. She kept her gaze on me. "You are either the bravest human I have ever encountered, or the most foolish. Which is it?" "I'm a translator," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm paid to be accurate, and accuracy requires seeing things as they are, not as they're presented. Right now, I see a commander with a very powerful fleet who could obliterate a colony without breaking a sweat. But I also see a commander who hasn't done that, who is here, talking to me instead, which suggests to me that maybe, just maybe, you're not as eager for a war as your posturing suggests." The silence stretched. Vexus's feathers slowly smoothed, the colors settling into a calmer, more contemplative pattern. She exchanged a long look with her second-in-command, a grizzled warrior with a scarred beak. Something passed between them, unspoken but clearly understood. Finally, Vexus spoke. "The Drazhari collective has a tradition. When two clans dispute a territory, they do not simply fight. They send their strongest warrior to engage in a battle of wills, a contest of intimidation and nerve. The one who breaks eye contact first, who shows fear first, loses the claim. It is a way to avoid bloodshed while still proving dominance." She paused. "I came here expecting to win such a battle against your species. to stare down your representatives until they blinked, and then claim this world without firing a shot. And instead I laughed. I said, the pieces falling into place. Instead you laughed, she confirmed. You did not flinch. You did not tremble. You did not even try to maintain a facade of respect. You found the entire performance amusing. In doing so, you achieved what no Drazhari warrior has ever achieved against me. A strange expression crossed her avian features. You made me break my own stance. You made me laugh with you. The second in command stepped forward. Commander, the ancient texts. A battle of wills can only be won by the one who holds their nerve. She not only held hers, she broke yours. By the old laws. I am aware of the old laws, Vexus said quietly. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than cold calculation in her golden eyes. Respect. By the laws of my ancestors, you have won this battle, Translator Alara. The claim to this moon is yours. I blinked. I what? Just like that? Because I laughed. Because you were real, she said. In a universe of posturing, of threats and counter-threats, of diplomatic dances and hidden agendas, you showed me something genuine. You showed me that your species, for all its softness, possesses a strength we did not anticipate. The strength to see the absurdity in even the most terrifying moments. That is not a weakness. That is a form of courage I have never encountered. She extended a hand, claws retracted, palm up. It was a gesture of peace among her people. The moon is yours, but I would like to understand this laughter, this ability to find joy in the face of fear. Perhaps you could teach me. I stared at her offered hand, my mind reeling. 20 minutes ago, I was expecting to be executed or at least imprisoned. Now, I was being offered a treaty and a request for cultural exchange. I reached out and placed my palm against hers. Her skin was warm and surprisingly soft. I think, I said carefully, that might be the beginning of a very interesting diplomatic relationship. 6 months later, I stood on the same command deck, but everything had changed. The harsh lighting had been softened at Vexus's request. A human delegation sat comfortably across from Drazhari negotiators, discussing joint scientific expeditions to the now thriving colony moon. And in the corner, Vexus and I shared a pot of tea, a beverage she had developed an intense fondness for. The governor is still frightened of you, I said, nodding towards where Heston was nervously sipping from a cup, his eyes darting towards the warriors flanking the room. Vexus ruffled her feathers in amusement. He still hides under his desk during drills. Every single time. She let out a series of soft, clicking trills, her laughter. I joined her with a genuine chuckle. The warriors around us no longer froze at the sound. They had grown accustomed to it, some even attempting their own hesitant versions of the human expression of mirth. You know, Vexus said, setting down her cup, I have studied your records extensively since our first meeting. Do you know what I have discovered? Your species laughs most freely when things are at their worst. In the midst of war, your comedians thrive. In times of grief, you tell jokes at funerals. After disasters, you share stories that make each other smile through the tears. I nodded. It's how we cope, how we survive. It is remarkable, she said, her golden eyes thoughtful. The Drazhari have always believed that showing vulnerability is death, that any crack in the armor is an invitation for an enemy to strike. But you showed me a crack, and instead of striking, I found myself wanting to look inside. She paused. Perhaps that is the true strength, not an unbreakable wall, but the courage to let someone see what's behind it. I thought about that first moment, the laugh that had bubbled up from nowhere and changed everything. It hadn't been strategy. It hadn't been courage. It had just been human. You know, I said, I think that might be the first thing I've ever translated perfectly. Vexus tilted her head, a gesture she'd picked up from me. And what would that be? I smiled. That the things we think make us weak, our laughter, our tears, our ability to find joy in the dark, are often the very things that make us strong. We just don't realize it until someone from the outside shows us. She considered this for a long moment, her feathers shifting through a slow, contemplative pattern of colors. Then she raised her teacup in a gesture that was entirely human, entirely borrowed, and entirely genuine. To laughter, she clicked. I raised my own cup. To the cracks in the armor. And on the command deck of a Drazhari Dreadnought, an alien commander and a human translator shared a moment of perfect understanding, translated not by neural implants or diplomatic protocol, but by the one language that needed no translation at all.